Okay, so your mid-mods and finals are closer to IronFEs in that you need to write functions that return something. So we're doing animals and zoos, which is a double data set, meaning that there is a variable animals, which looks like an array of animal objects. Each animal has a name, a weight, a type, and a home. And then if we scroll down, we'll find a zoos array of zoo objects. Each zoo is a name, a max weight, types allowed, and continents. Let's see if there's anything that kind of overlaps. So it looks like type overlaps and home and continents overlap. So maybe in some future questions, they might actually have us use the values for those to return something. Show that. First question we get says, return an array with all the zoos that allow carnivores. So we know this is like a zoo object. We know that they have a property types allowed that has an array, and inside of that array, they have string values. So like this zoo doesn't allow carnivores. So our output would not have San Antonio Zoo for carnivores. So it kind of gives you an outline. It says like, if we call a find carnivores function, it should give us an array of 3 zoo objects. Each of those zoo objects allow carnivores. Does anybody have a guess? Oh, so first thing I always start with is writing out the shell format. So function find carnivores. Oops. We're gonna need to return something, and then we call that function. So I know I'm going to be working off the zoos array. I don't need animals right now. Anybody have a guess as to what iterator method I'm going to use?
The one that checks for like a condition. It could be, I guess you could do filter.
Filter, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
So filters, I use map or reduce when I want to return an array of the same length. I use find if I want to return one thing, right? Find finds the first thing that meets a criteria and returns it. Filter finds anything that meets that set criteria. So I'm going to do zoos.filter, and then you can do zoo, or I like to remind myself that I'm iterating through zoos by doing current zoo. Your arrow, what do they call it? Fat arrow method, arrow function. It's a callback function. So it's saying if this thing on the right side is truthy, return that current zoo into your new array. So we need to come up with a truthy, falsy criteria. So I'm going to do current zoo dot types allowed and I need to figure out, okay, so that's an array. So I can do this a couple ways. You could do a for each and iterate through types allowed till you have a match, or you could do dot includes and it wants only things that are carnivores. So I think this should work. I'm gonna run it and I get, what is this? Do I have another, might have another function being called here. Yeah. Okay, refresh. All right, now I get an array of my zoo objects. It seems to match the intended output here. I notice I have carnivore in all of my types allowed. You don't have to do this really ever, except for maybe like a production coding. You definitely won't need to do this in a mid-mod or final, but I'm going to go and try to make this a little more dynamic. I want to send in carnivore as a string. So I'm going to call this argument. Send it in as an argument. Let's see if it still works. Does. But now I can also, I could do something like, I could find the herbivores. Cool. I made that a little more dynamic. If I was being good, I would change the function name to like find types allowed. I would change argument to type or something like that. This still works. Okay. So I'm going to comment that out. So I'm not calling this function. I'm going to move to the next. What's up, Stephanie?
I noticed on the JS fun that the instructors had named the functions without like a action verb. Like you said find carnivores, but they did something like all carnivores as their name. And I guess maybe it's because it was stored in a variable, and it just confused me as whether or not we're supposed to continue to name our functions with a verb, or if it's okay to do something like all carnivores or all zoos, or something like songs with they just named it like almost like an array, but maybe that's because it was in a variable. Like they stored the arrow function in a variable.
Okay. Technically, I don't know if you've ever heard of input-output languages. JavaScript, if I remember correctly, isn't necessarily a strict input-output language. But what that means is a language that is function-based, that relies on, so JavaScript is function and class-based. It's both of those things. It can be written both ways. You can write strictly function-based applications where all it is functions. But input output refers to an input argument, like you're sending in something to a function. You're making that function do one thing and return a different thing, right? So input, output. That would imply to me that it's doing a thing, it's doing a specific thing, and then therefore an action verb would be appropriate. Okay. Again, a lot of these things are like, they're teaching you convention and they're teaching you best practice. I would say, I can't think of a time where I wouldn't look for action word.
Okay.
Yeah, but
thank you.
I don't think that it's like nothing breaks if I don't use find, right? You know, so they in a mid mod or a final, they might give you feedback on that, but they wouldn't, I don't think they would hold you back for not using an action verb. That's for sure. I don't think so.
Okay, thanks so much. I just kept seeing it, and so I thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the next one says return an array of zoos that can take animals from Asia. So I see we have in our zoo objects, we have continents. So it seems like a super similar test from the previous one. Instead of filtering for current zoo dot types allowed, we're going to do current zoo dot continents. So function. I'm just going to make this dynamic from the get-go. Function. Find animals. No, find zoos that allow continents. Ooh. And continent name. Return something. Call that function. And right now we're looking for Asia. All right, so I am returning zoo objects. Zoo is an array, or zoos is an array. Oops, filter. Oh, I'm not showing pseudocoding. Pseudocoding is super important. I meant to start this off with pseudocoding. You should pseudocode everything. They want to see pseudocoding. I have heard they will pass you if you pseudocode super well, but then if you get to actually solving the problem, if there's a typo or whatever, if it's not working out the way the pseudocode was intended, you can still get a pass bit just off your pseudocode. So maybe I should back up and go, you know, start out with, what do I want? I want to return an array, a new array of zoo objects that that include Asia, zoo continents. So I've seen some people do something like this, where they just say, I think I'm going to use filter. I think I'm going to use includes. I think that's good enough. That's probably as minimal as you need to be, but you could say going to iterate over use array with filter, and then create true the condition if zoo dot continent includes Asia. All right, and this will super help if you start to choke so much. So like if you're one of those people that finds themselves that you know, assessments can be challenging or, you know, induce a lot of nerves, pseudocode. It will help you so much. All right, so back on our dot filter. So we're going to filter zoos. We're going to go one zoo at a time. So now I am working on a current zoo, and I'm going to test that current zoo dot continents includes the thing that I'm sending in. Sending in a string of Asia. It is a string. Okay, let's see if that works. All of these have Asia, Asia, Asia. Their example looks like 5 objects. So it looks the same. Word of warning, you didn't put these in strings. It's not going to work. So includes is, I don't know how to put this in words, but it needs to be perfect. It needs to be exact. So yeah, there's that one. Let's see if we've got a good one. Make a function that takes an animal name and returns their home continent. All right. So this is a fun one because we have animal name, find home for tiger. All right. So see here that the tiger object does have a home. Where are we? Okay, so I'm going to be iterating over animals array. And I want to, I only want to return tiger.home. So I think what I'm going to use, is find. Find will find the first one. First thing that meets a certain criteria. So I'm going to use find to, again, I'm given the name. So to find my current animal that has a name strictly equal. All right, let's start writing that out. Make a function. All right, find home tiger. I'm already sending it in. Let's just say animal name. Make it dynamic. Again, you don't always need to make it dynamic to pass a mid-mod or final. Sometimes you do, but this is probably best practice. So I want to go through animals, which is an array of animal objects, with find current animal, callback function, which will return that current animal object if this thing is true. The thing I want to test for truthiness is current animal dot name strictly equal to the thing I'm passing in, animal name. All right, let's see what that gives me. All right, I've got the tiger object, but that's not what they asked for. They want just Africa, which I have here. Anybody have a guess as to what I might can do to return that home, that object.home?
You have to create a variable inside the function.
You can do that. So I can, instead of returning directly, I can let a variable, say, let found animal object equal this. And then if I return, always have to have a return. If I return this, I should get the same, should be the exact same thing. But then I can do return that found animal objects dot home. Bam. Got it. There is one other way you can write this. This is totally fine. This works. You pass. You're done. You're moving on. You could still write it this way. And then what we call chain. Chain on just that you want a dot home. Bam. So that works too. Either way works. Whatever you want, it works. It's fine. Make a function that takes a quantity and an animal name and returns their total weight. Okay, so I have an animal name, animal has weight. I wonder if how can I rewrite this one? So find total weight. Actually, they have it. Weighing animals. Weighing animals, and they're sending in a couple things. They're sending in an animal name and a quantity. All right, if I do this, am I gonna get, let's take off this home. Am I gonna get my wolf? I get my wolf. Can I do weight and get the weight? Can I return it times that quantity? Oh shit, we just solved for it. And that was made easy because we made the original thing dynamic. So the amount of refactoring was minimal. Sometimes this is just too much chaining for a brain to handle. Totally welcome to do what we did. Let object equal this. Let animal weight equal object dot weight. Let total weight equal animal weight times quantity. And then you always have to return something. You're definitely not. Definitely, that'll be a strike against you if you're not returning anything, if you don't remember to return anything. So that should return the same thing. You always want to return something. Probably my last note for this little instructional is sometimes your min mods will have conditionals in them. So it's like, I think for my final, I was given an array. It was an order. It was like order const order equals cow quantity of 5. So mine was actually an object. This is going to complicate things. This is where you're going to need to learn something else, but it doesn't need to be mentioned until like week 4. But object.keys and object.values is going to help many of you pass the final, but it's only the final. It's not on the mid-mod. But anyways, long story short, I was given an order of things. And I was given let's say this. Let's say somebody wanted 11 of something, 11 of order of corn. And I had an inventory. Of corn. Oh, Jesus. I had to do this. I had to return a string of, like, I can make that order if I had the right amount of inventory, or I had to return, I cannot make that order. So I had to write a function, you know, let's see, what would I call that?
Fill order.
Say that again?
The fill order.
Sure. Find fulfillment. And I had to send these in as arguments. So I had my order and my inventory. And the way they did it for me, if I remember correctly, is they didn't give me these consts. They told me I had to copy them from one other place and send them in this way. Which, if I console log, should be getting these through. All right, I'm getting the stuff. I'm not going to solve this one, but I'm just going to show that I needed to write an if else statement. So I needed to say if I could fulfill order equals true, then I needed to do this. Else, I needed to do this. So that's just my last little thing, is if you get used to writing functions, that's great, but also think about all these little edge cases they could give you. Maybe come up with some practice problems for each other. Maybe you guys could ask us. Some of us remember our mid-mod and final assessment questions really well and can probably reproduce similar versions of them for you. But you're going to get stuff that looks like this. Sometimes some people are going to get less data heavy things, and they're going to get a string, and it's going to say, like, it's going to be a string of words like, hey, my name is, and they want you to return just the word name. Well, how do you do that? I'll tell you there's great practice with strings in this IronFE called fake URL. Fake URL is going to teach you everything you need to know about how to do stuff like that. But essentially give you some hints with strings. There are some methods, you have to work with the methods for the type of data you're given. So let's say we want to get to name. Name is,
You split.
it's the third word in there, but it's not an array. So you can't use array methods on it. You have to use string methods. And so there is a string method. You might be right on the split. I can't remember. String methods are never my forte. I always have to look at documentation on whether it's split or splice or whatever. But there is a string method that will turn a string into an array. And then you can access indices of that array and say return a certain indices of a string array. But anyways, long story short, JS Fun is great for pure iterator method practice. IronFE is more like your, they still use iterator methods, but it is more like the format of your assessments, and they throw in some extra stuff there. They throw in some practice with strings. So I'm a big fan of doing both. I think it should be like 50-50, but you definitely need some IronFEs in there. And as you can see, this is like my old Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to do all of them. You can get to some that are just ridiculous and never touch them. You don't need to touch them. So yeah, anyways, that's my spiel.